The video is terrifying. It shows how chaotic it was as a mass shooting unfolded. And authorities say bystanders stepped up and their heroic actions saved countless lives. We want to warn you, the video you are about to watch is disturbing. This morning, officials releasing stunning new surveillance and body camera video from that deadly shooting spree beginning at an In-N-Out in Twin Falls, Idaho. 10 people were shot. 3 of them died from their injuries.
What's happening?
What happened?
What's happening?
Shoot.
Police say 24-year-old Chad Williams is seen here, arriving at the drive-thru and emerging with a weapon, fatally shooting a worker through the payment window. He then shoots and kills the driver in front of his car. Inside the restaurant, you can see employees scrambling, ducking for cover, and running for their lives. An off-duty state trooper helps them evacuate and fires back at the suspect.
Heroically and unbelievably, this trooper also assisted responding officers, leading them towards their last known direction of the shooter, and then took up a position at a key location to provide security until he could be relieved.
Authorities also commending Good Samaritans, including former Twin Falls police officer Austin James, who ran towards the gunfire and drew his own weapon, getting shot by the suspect. Armed civilian Jordan Salinas also firing shots.
As soon as some rounds started coming at him, everything changed. Immediately, all that bravado he had immediately crumbled.
The gunman running to a nearby Tesla charging station where he shot 3 people, killing Dale Schultz. He then heads toward a visitor center where those inside are taking cover. Once the gunman exits, police say an employee bravely distracted him long enough for others to escape.
To that young man, you are a hero. Your courage, your composure, your selflessness, and that moment likely gave others the time they needed to escape harm.
Moments later, the shooter fires at the employee and runs away.
Hey, police! Can you hear me? Okay, do you see a man? Where'd he go? That way?
Police eventually coming face to face with the gunman.
Hey! Show me your hands!
The shooter died at the scene from a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
Families in this area, on what should have been a normal Saturday afternoon, dealt with the worst thing imaginable. Our hearts are with every victim and family that are now carrying the weight of this tragedy.
A life of joy and...
Although officers say they at first investigated a potential second shooter, they believe the suspect acted alone. Officials say they are still investigating a motive. Rachel.
Just incredible courage from those Good Samaritans. Okay, Jacqueline, thank you.
Twin Falls, Idaho. A new burger place on a main road. The drive-through line was long. Hundreds of people were in the area. Staff were working the counter. Customers were sitting in their cars waiting on orders. At 2:29 in the afternoon, a man walked up with a rifle and started shooting. People ran. One woman came around the front of a white car and found herself face to face with him. He was standing there pointing the rifle at her. She got down behind the vehicle and waited. He moved on, and a few seconds later, someone shot back at him. That someone was not a police officer on duty. He was a customer. He heard the gunfire from outside the restaurant and went looking for it instead of leaving. He was armed, and he opened fire. Everything changed after that. The man with the rifle stopped moving forward. He started looking around, trying to work out where the shots were coming from. Within minutes, he was off the property. Not long after, he was dead. 3 people did not survive that afternoon. 7 more were wounded. And the man who did it had spent the last 2 years online arguing that ordinary people should be allowed to carry guns to protect themselves. Welcome to the Crime Executioner. If you're new here, subscribe and turn on the bell. Let's start at the beginning. He was 24 years old. He grew up in Waddle, Arizona, a quiet community about 30 miles west of Phoenix. Flat ground, wide streets, new houses. The kind of place people move to because nothing much happens there. His name was Chad Williams. In August of 2022, he enrolled at the College of Southern Idaho in Twin Falls. He picked nursing. In a short biography he wrote for the college, he said he wanted a career in healthcare. He wanted to help people. He also described himself. He said he enjoyed combat sports, role-playing, history, and gaming. Ordinary interests. The kind of list 1,000 other students his age could have written. People who lived near him at the time did not see anything unusual. One student who lived across the hall from him in the dorms later spoke about what he was like. He described him as an introvert, someone who kept to himself. He said he was never scared of him and never found him strange. That is the entire record. A nursing major from Arizona who kept quiet and stayed in his room. He remained enrolled until December of 2023. He left without a degree. The College of Southern Idaho has since confirmed that he studied there during those 16 months and did not graduate with a credential. Now, before we go any further, there is something you need to know about how this video is put together. On the 7th of August, 6 days after the shooting, Twin Falls police made an announcement at a press conference. They said that from that point forward, they would no longer use the shooter's name. They would refer to him only as the suspect, or the gunman. Chief Matthew Hicks explained why. He said that after an act of mass violence, the person responsible should not become the lasting identity of the tragedy. He said the focus needed to stay on the victims, on the injured, and on the people whose lives were permanently changed. We have named him once. We did that because you cannot verify a case you are not allowed to check, and every fact in this video has been checked. But for the rest of this documentary, he is the gunman. The 3 people who died have names. You will hear all of them. Ashley, Christopher, Dale. Those are the names worth remembering, and they are the ones we are going to keep saying. For a while, he tried. Not long after arriving on campus, he ran for a seat in the student senate. That is not a small thing. Student government at a community college is not glamorous work. It is meetings, minutes, small budgets, and long agendas about parking and club funding. Nobody does it by accident. You have to put your name forward and ask people to trust you with something. He asked, and they said yes. Then he stopped turning up. The absences started to add up. So did the silence. He was not voting on measures. He was not participating in the work he had campaigned to do. Other senators noticed, because in a body that small, one empty chair is impossible to miss. In February of 2023, they voted to remove him. The reason given was straightforward. Inactivity, disengagement, repeated absence. He was impeached from the Student Senate roughly 6 months after he began. There was no scandal attached to it, no confrontation, no incident anyone reported. He was not thrown out for something he did. He was thrown out for something he stopped doing. 10 months later, he was gone from the college entirely. It is worth sitting with the shape of that, because it is the only thing in his history that looks like a change of direction. A young man arrives in a new state. He tells the school he wants a career caring for other people. He volunteers for a small responsibility. And then, quietly, without explanation, he disengages from all of it. That is not a warning sign. Thousands of students drop out every year. Thousands lose interest in student government. If this had been the end of his story, nobody would ever have looked at it twice. But it is the last documented point at which anyone in an institution was watching him closely enough to notice he had stopped showing up. After Twin Falls police identified him, they made contact with his family. Chief Matthew Hicks said the family was cooperating fully with investigators. He also said something else about them, and it is worth repeating exactly. He said their hearts were broken too. He left almost nothing behind. No manifesto, no note, no message to anyone explaining himself. What he did leave was an account on X, and it went quiet more than a year before the shooting. Reporters who traced it found a profile that referenced Arizona Boys State in 2019 and named Waddell as his hometown. The posting stops around July of 2025. What is on it is political, and it is consistent. In November of 2024, he wrote about an armed carjacking that had happened near the house where he grew up. He described a man pointing a rifle at a front door on a street close to his childhood home. His point was the randomness of it, that the person inside that house had done nothing and could have been killed simply for walking outside at the wrong moment. He posted about prosecutors. In one, he criticized Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, citing a figure that Bragg had downgraded 60% of felony cases in a year, including violent ones, and arguing that New Yorkers no longer felt safe in their own city. He contrasted that with Bragg's prosecution of Donald Trump, and said it was time for district attorneys who put public safety ahead of politics. He posted in support of gun rights. He reposted a message thanking a member of Congress for co-sponsoring national constitutional carry legislation. And in 2025, replying to a post by a Trump administration advisor, he questioned why a 4 to 6 year degree should be required to work as a deportation officer or a criminal investigator at ICE, when the country had been founded and policed by people without those credentials. Now here is the part that matters, and you will not hear it in most coverage of this case. Authorities have identified no ideological or political motive for this attack. Investigators have not indicated that anything he posted played any role in what he did. As of the most recent briefing, no motive has been established at all. That distinction is not a technicality. Within 24 hours of the shooting, the internet had already decided who he was. Police had to publicly correct it. A completely different man, an active duty service member who happened to share the same name, was accused online and targeted with harassment. Chief Matthew Hicks addressed it directly and said the claim was absolutely false and that the man had no involvement whatsoever. Police also had to knock down a separate rumor that the shooter had been a member of a fire department. He had not. If you want a channel that waits for the paperwork instead of running with the rumor, subscribe now. We are about to walk through the timeline exactly as investigators reconstructed it, and almost none of what the internet said in the first week survives contact with it. The restaurant opened on the 24th of July, 2026. It was part of a push by In-N-Out into Idaho, and Twin Falls had been waiting for it. The location was Canyon Park West, a commercial district on the north side of the city. Hotels, chain retailers, restaurants, the busiest stretch of road in a town of around 50,000 people. For 8 days, it was the most popular place in Twin Falls. The drive-through line ran long enough to back toward the road. Cars idling, families waiting, staff working fast to keep up with volume the building had never handled before. Saturday, the 1st of August, was one of those days. Hundreds of people were in the area that afternoon. Some in the restaurant, some in the parking lot. Some in the businesses on either side, doing ordinary weekend errands. At 2:29 in the afternoon, the Twin Falls City Communications Center began receiving 911 calls reporting shots fired. Chief Matthew Hicks later described what the dispatcher taking those calls could hear in the background: screaming and gunshots. Investigators would spend the following week reconstructing exactly how it began, using surveillance footage from the restaurant itself. What that footage showed was not what most people assumed. It did not start in the parking lot, it started at the window. A white Honda Civic pulled up to the drive-through payment window, the way thousands of cars had that week. Ordering, paying, moving forward. Routine. The driver was armed. The person working that window was Ashley Garibay. She was 23 years old. She was not a local hire. She was a manager for In-N-Out, part of a team the company sends out to train staff at newly opened locations, which is why she was more than 700 miles from where she lived. She was the first person shot. The car did not stop moving. It pulled forward in the drive-through lane and parked. The driver got out. There was another vehicle nearby with a man sitting in it, waiting like everyone else. He was the second person shot. Fewer than 30 seconds had passed since the first call reached dispatch. Nobody in that parking lot yet understood what was happening. Some people heard the sound and looked up. Some kept eating. One woman inside the building heard the noise coming from the kitchen and was told by an employee to get down on the floor. Outside, the man who had climbed out of the Civic was still standing between the parked cars. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, people started to run. Almost everyone ran away from the sound. 3 men did not. The first was Austin James. He was not on duty. He was not wearing a uniform. He was a former Twin Falls police officer and a former Idaho state trooper, and on that Saturday afternoon, he was simply a man near a restaurant. He heard gunfire coming from the drive-thru and he moved toward it. He got close enough to come face to face with the gunman, and he was shot. What he did in the seconds after that is the part worth understanding, because it explains something about how these situations actually work. He was carrying a handgun. He drew it from his waistband, and then he made a decision that almost nobody would make while injured and under fire. He did not shoot. He had spent years in law enforcement. He knew what was coming down that road. Officers were seconds out, arriving into a scene with no information, looking for a man with a gun. Austin James was a man with a gun. He understood exactly how that would read to someone arriving at speed with nothing but a description to work from. So he held his fire and he did not become a second target. Other people reached him and pulled him back out of the open. He needed medical attention immediately. He got it before any ambulance arrived, because his wife was there, and she is an emergency room nurse. She and a friend, also an ER nurse, treated him where he lay. He was then transported to hospital. The second man was Jordan Salinas. He was 35 years old, from Kimberly, a small town just outside Twin Falls. He was not law enforcement and never had been. He had started training seriously with firearms years earlier, after a mass shooting at the Boise Town Square Mall in October of 2021. He had been carrying ever since. He had never used it. He heard the shooting, and rather than leaving, he went looking for where it was coming from. He was armed with a suppressed handgun. He found the gunman near the drive-thru, and he opened fire. He later described to the Idaho Statesman what he saw happen next. He said the man did not like it when bullets started firing both ways. The third man was an off-duty Idaho State Police trooper who was inside the restaurant when it started. He did not wait for backup either. Chief Matthew Hicks said the trooper's actions began inside the building, exchanging gunfire with the gunman through the window. And when that was over, he was not finished. He went into the kitchen and started moving employees out, directing them through the building and outside to safety. 3 men, one shot and holding his fire on purpose. One civilian who had trained for years for something he hoped would never happen. One off-duty officer who fought and then evacuated a kitchen full of teenagers. Most coverage of this case named one hero. There were 3, and their names are Austin James, Jordan Salinas, and a trooper whose name has still not been released. If you want the full version instead of the headline version, subscribe. Because what happened next is the part almost nobody has heard. The shooting at the restaurant was over. The incident was not. The first Twin Falls police officer arrived on scene 3 minutes after the call. 3 minutes, in a city that had never dealt with anything remotely like this, is fast. But by the time he pulled in, the man he was looking for was already leaving. The officer had no way of knowing which direction. He was arriving into a parking lot full of running people, damaged vehicles, and casualties, with no clear picture of anything. The off-duty trooper solved that for him. Still on scene, he pointed the arriving officer toward the suspect and told him where he had gone. The gunman was moving away from the restaurant on foot, and he was still armed. He crossed through a busy intersection in one of the most heavily trafficked commercial districts in southern Idaho on a Saturday afternoon, with traffic still moving and people still unaware. He was heading for the Twin Falls Visitor Center. Inside that building, people had already begun to realize something was wrong. Some of them saw him coming through the glass. Word moved fast, and most of the people inside got out. 3 of them could not. They were still in the building when he came through the door. They did what people are trained to do and almost never have to. They found a place to hide, they stayed silent, and they waited while an armed man moved through the same building. He did not find them. He left the visitor center and headed toward a public walking trail that runs along that stretch of the canyon rim. Outside, near the trail, he encountered 2 employees. One of them did something extraordinary. Rather than running, he confronted the gunman directly. He put himself in front of him and engaged with him, and in doing so he took up time. Seconds. Maybe more. Time that other people used to get clear of the area. He was shot at, he survived. Chief Matthew Hicks spoke about him at a later press conference and called him a hero. He said the man's actions during that encounter likely gave other people the time they needed to escape harm. By then, officers were closing in on the trail from behind. The gunman broke away from the visitor center property and ran up the trail, away from the city, toward open ground and the edge of the canyon. It was 2:35 in the afternoon, or close to it, and Twin Falls had no idea that the hardest part of the day was still in front of them. It took 90 minutes for police to establish that they were dealing with one shooter. That number is the one that deserves examining, because it explains almost everything about how the rest of that afternoon went. The problem was not the response. Officers were there in 3 minutes, and local, state, and federal agencies were rolling in behind them within the hour. The problem was information. Once the first calls went out, the reports did not stop, and they did not agree. Dispatch began receiving accounts of active shooters at other locations across the city. One set of reports pointed toward the mall. Officers had to break off and respond, because there was no way to know from a radio call which reports were real. Every false one cost them people and vehicles they could not spare. Chief Matthew Hicks described the effect of it later. During those 90 minutes, officers received multiple reports of possible active shooters in different locations, and those reports pulled attention and resources away from the actual search. None of them were real. All of them had to be treated as though they were. At one point during that search, a second officer-involved shooting occurred. No one was injured. Because it involved a Twin Falls officer, the department did not investigate itself. The Jerome Police Department was brought in to handle that inquiry independently, and it remains a separate matter from the main case. Meanwhile, the actual search narrowed. Officers worked the walking trail. They cleared a nearby construction site. They moved along the edge of the canyon, checking ground that drops away hundreds of feet. He was not on the trail. He had gone off it. An officer found him hiding near the canyon edge, in the gap between the construction site and a Petco store, and confronted him. He took his own life. His body fell into the canyon. That was the end of the threat. It was not the end of the 90 minutes. Officers still had a city convinced there were more gunmen, and no way yet to prove otherwise. 10 people were shot that afternoon. 3 of them did not survive. This is who they were. Ashley Garibay was 23 years old. She was from Stockton, California, which is roughly 700 miles from Twin Falls, and she was in Idaho for work. She had risen far enough at In-N-Out to be placed on the team the company sends out to open new restaurants and train the people who will run them. That is a job you are given because you are good at it. Her family said she loved the work. They described her as an amazing, beautiful soul who loved living life. They said she was adventurous, outgoing, smart and driven, and that she never let obstacles get in her way. She had told people she wanted to manage her own store one day. She was 23 and already on the track to get there. Christopher Claunch was 59, and he lived in Hagerman, Idaho, a small town about 30 miles from Twin Falls. He had spent part of his life fighting a substance problem, and he had won. He got sober, and then he turned around and spent his time helping other people do the same thing. That is the detail his community keeps returning to. He did not just recover, he went back for other people. Dale Schultz was 66, from Salt Lake City. He had finished a day of work, and he was charging his vehicle. Nothing more than that. He was sitting in a parking lot at the end of an ordinary Saturday. In-N-Out's president, Lindsay Snyder, released a statement. She wrote that her heart was broken, that her chest was heavy, and that her eyes burned from the tears she had shed. She said the company had lost one of its associates, a young woman who had been taking care of customers when her life was taken. On the 4th of August, 3 days after the shooting, hundreds of people gathered at Twin Falls City Park. A memorial had been built there. 3 crosses, each with a blue heart carrying one of their names, where people could write something to them. One person spoke. City Council member Grayson Stone. He said there was nothing he could say to help heal it, except that they be together. We named them here because a case like this has a way of collapsing into the man who caused it. If you think that is backwards, subscribe. It is how we work. On the 7th of August, 6 days after the shooting, Twin Falls officials sat down in the council chambers at City Hall and laid out what they had. Police Chief Matthew Hicks was there. So was Twin Falls County Sheriff Jack Johnson. So was Twin Falls County Prosecutor Grant Lubes. And so was Michael Montoya of the FBI, which had put agents on scene the day it happened and had been assisting ever since. They brought a video. Roughly 10 minutes of it, assembled from surveillance footage and body camera recordings, walking through the sequence of the afternoon in order. Officials shown it in that room included the mayor. Some of it was hard to sit through, and the department said so before it played. Hicks described what his officers had faced in plain terms. He called it by far the most extreme, complex, and dangerous situation his department had ever dealt with, and said it was completely unprecedented in their community. Then he was asked the question everyone wanted answered. He said investigators have not determined a motive. That was 6 days in, with the FBI assisting, with his phone and his accounts available, with his family cooperating fully, and with hundreds of witnesses. And the honest answer was that they did not know why. He also said the investigation remains active. Witness statements are still being reviewed. Footage is still being examined. Evidence is still being processed. So understand what that means. Anyone telling you today that they know what was in this man's head is not reporting. They are guessing. The people with access to every piece of evidence in this case have said clearly that they cannot answer it yet. There is one thing about this case that will not sit still. For years, this man argued online that ordinary people should be able to protect themselves. He posted about a stranger with a rifle near his childhood home and about how easily an innocent person could have been killed for nothing. He supported the right to carry. And on the 1st of August, he was driven off a crowded parking lot by a civilian with a handgun, an off-duty trooper who did not wait, a former officer who was shot and held his fire so nobody else would be hurt, and an employee who stood in front of him on a walking trail so other people could get away. He was stopped by exactly the thing he said he believed in. It would be easy to build a theory out of that. Plenty of people already have. But police have said no ideological motive has been identified, and investigators have never indicated those posts had anything to do with what he did. So we are left with a case that looks like it should mean something, and no evidence yet that it does. That is not a satisfying ending. It is just the accurate one. What is certain is that 10 people were shot in a parking lot on an ordinary Saturday. that several strangers ran toward the danger instead of away from it, and that 3 people did not come home. Ashley Garibay, Christopher Claunch, Dale Schultz. Those are the names.